So as we move on to our next discussion, our second panel discussion, lost and found. If any of you lost your car keys, you can redeem it at the registration counter. So our next panel discussion, automating Southeast Asia's BFSI sector. Now, automating banking and insurance operations, the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning in providing frictionless, innovative banking solutions to increase return on investment. How artificial intelligence and machine learning, AI and ML, are impacting different aspects of banking, insurance, and more importantly, compliance, credit, loan, as well as fraud detection. Now, so how far has the technology been implemented for risk management and future scope? How RPA is helping banks and financial institutions to increase their productivity by engaging customers in real time and leveraging the immense benefits of robots. Now, is the current workforce ready for a complete digital transformation? So the topic, automating Southeast Asia's BFSI sector. I'd like to firstly introduce our moderator for this session, Cynthia Goh, Head Risk Transformation and Model Management, Maybank Ageas Holding Berhad. Our panel members, Tomasz Kurczyk, Executive Committee Member and InsurTech Committee Chair, Singapore Fintech Association, Robert Pizzari, APAC Vice President Security, Splunk, and Sourabh Chitrachar, Regional VP Asia, Technology, Strategy and Ops, Liberty Insurance Private Limited. Can we please give our panel members a big round of applause, please? Welcome. So before we hand the time over, just a gentle reminder, if you have any questions, please remember to identify yourself and the organization that you're from. So with that, Cynthia, over to you.
Thank you very much. So before I begin, please allow me to declare that all statements made by me today are of my personal view and does not represent my past, present, and future employer. Okay, now that is out of the way, let us begin. So, well, it's really hard to talk about the automation in Southeast Asia BFSI sector without first talking about the role and the impact that artificial intelligence and the machine learning on financial institutions. So today, we are very happy that we have an amazing panel to do just that. And I am excited and thrilled to introduce them as they take their stage. So Mr. Tomasz, Mr. Sourabh, and also Mr. Robert. So we start with Mr. Tomasz on my left. So Mr. Tomasz serves as the Singapore Fintech Association Exco and the chair of InsurTech Committee. He is passionate about delivering tangible impact for the purpose to accelerate organizations to reach their full potential in the digital age. So Mr. Tomasz, would you like to share more about yourself?
Yes, I spent the past 10 years in the industry, in the insurance industry. So happy to share the different perspective from the, first of all, from the ecosystem perspective, fintech and insurtech, but as well as if I can contribute with my personal experience, happy to share as well and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tomasz. So now we move to Mr. Robert. So Mr. Robert is the APAC Vice President of Security with Splunk. His dedication on cybersecurity leads him to be an expert in dealing with complexity arising from financially motivated threats and adversaries. So Mr. Robert, may I have your time to speak more about yourself?
Yeah, look, thanks for the intro. As they say, they often save the best to last. Clearly, that's happened today, and we've got a very extended audience, but thanks for sticking around for this session. When I was asked to join the panel for this particular session around ML and AI and the acceleration into financial services, I actually took a 3-year view based on what Splunk has been doing across the industry, given our heritage as a data platform. And in my current capacity, focus on cybersecurity, helping organizations deal with the threat landscape, the changes, supporting the business drivers in heading into digital new services. What I then realized is that our heritage and how Splunk fell into security actually started because of dealing with structured data, but then more importantly, machine data. And later as we go through the Q&A, I'll share some sort of stories around the adoption of ML, the crossover between cyber and fraud, and what we've seen across a number of organizations where these entities have actually merged. One, to deal with reducing risk for the organization, and two, breaking down some of the organizational barriers, the data barriers, and some of the historical silos.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robert. So last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Sourabh. Sourabh is the Regional VP of Technology Strategy and Operations in the Liberty Insurance Private Limited. So his expertise spanned across a wide range of technological area across Southeast Asia, Europe, US of A, and Australia. So Mr. Sourabh, would you like to have a quick one?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to the panel. Like Thomas mentioned, probably 10 years in the industry. In fact, almost 17 years in the industry across different regions. I mean, North America, Europe, and Asia now. And very passionate about different topics. I mean, ranging from technology to travel to culture. So, I mean, because I personally think, technology is, very important, but at the same time, what makes the technology work are the people. And that's the culture and the people which I'm very passionate about. So, thank you.
Yes, I agree. People are of the core assets of the team. Okay, so thank you very much. So we start with the automation of the operations within the banking insurance industry. So I would like to address this to Mr. Thomas. So may I ask, what are the roles of AI and ML play in providing seamless solution in improving the operations?
So I think that we need to consider the application of AI and automation at least multiple levels, and especially from the strategy perspective. Because one is definitely in an industry like insurance, it can be applied across the full value chain. That starts with the product innovation, to understand and mine the areas of risk or emerging risk. And coming back to the topic of previous session, but as well what Robert mentioned is cyber is a big topic, where AI and machine learning in detecting and assessing the security posture of a company or an entity, combined with the potential protection products in the future is a great opportunity for growth. That spans equally across operations. Everyone's talking about the automating and operation because two factors. In Asia, the aspect of cost from the perspective of removing the human labor is not as pronounced maybe like in other areas and geographies, like especially in US and Europe, because the business case is a bit harder in many cases to outsource or fully automate, especially from the CapEx investment versus the savings. And let's be honest, no one likes to fire people. And despite we always say, every single organization is saying that we want to reskill people, but it's harder to do than actually to say it. So it's not a straightforward application. But the past 2 or 3 years, I think, highlighted one very important aspect of automation, and especially applying the AI and machine learning to things like process mining, is actually reducing the fragility of the process by depending on outsourced operations or human operations. And a lot of organizations across the industry and across the regions at the beginning of the pandemic suffered because somewhere, I don't know, in other parts of the world, in different country, there was a massive lockdown, and either the partner or their own operations were not prepared for it, and there was an area of a big stress and for the organization sometimes breaking the processes. Before, whenever you went to the CFO to submit a business case, resilience was considered a qualitative measure. It was never considered a quantitative measure. It was, you were always adding this to, but actually no one was looking at this because anyone was looking purely at the number. What is basically payback period? And ROI, expected ROI of the investments. The past 2 years show that actually resilience, it is quantitative measure, and this actually is pushing and driving a lot of automation across the whole industry, from using pure AI to using technologies like RPA, but as well as creating a lot of new entrants and startups in the ecosystem, fintechs in the ecosystem, to tackle exactly this process, because market has arrived the maturity stage. I would just mention one last point, because I don't want to steal the thunder from the rest of my fellow panelists. Important aspect is customer experience, and here we have a tremendous number of examples, especially in the insurance, where using technologies like machine learning to eradicate fraud, but as well as to completely automate the claim process, especially utilizing computer vision, where instead of submitting the forms, customer can snap the picture of a car, of a house to them, and damage is automatically assessed, and then goes through down the funnel to assess the severity as well as plausibility of the damage, and automating completely the payout, which is actually the type of the experience that the whole industry was thinking and was dreaming to deliver for many years, to remove the first notification of loss aspect, remove it from insurance. And as well, the ecosystem in terms of startups is very rich here. We have quite a few unicorns in InsurTech. InsurTech is still a space quite young. There's not so many. It doesn't breed so many unicorns as the broader fintech, but this space is quite in the space of claims, because it delivers tangible value for the organization and the client.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. I echo your thoughts on the resilience that we have, especially in the past 2 years. When it comes to implementing technology in the operations, I believe that not only the people who are in the BAU needs to adapt, the customer itself also needs to adapt to it, especially implementation does take time, testings and go on. So, Mr. Sourabh, you are the best in this area. Do you have anything to add on this part?
Basically, the only thing which I'll add on top of what Thomas just mentioned is around, especially when you look at customer experience, right? So that part, one of the things, even in so whether it is insurance, banking, or any financial institution, I mean, one of the applications which I see in operations is around the customer service, right? So in there, when you talk about customer service, in the call centers, we are now seeing the advent of sentiment analysis. So that is something which is kind of new, and a lot of companies are adapting to it. And on top of it, because that's where you can basically, as an agent in the past, you did not know really as to what the customer mood is or sentiment is, and this helps you kind of understand and maybe slow down your tone, or understand what the customer is saying. So that is something which is an innovative sort of technology which has come into play. And we have seen it implemented in some of our markets within our organization as well. And then the other area which I would say is also around the AI chatbots. So that in operations is very, very helpful because it basically helps reduce your time for interaction, right? So, I mean, where you would be waiting for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, here you can basically get an immediate answer. Now, you can always, argue about the accuracy of the algorithm, which is still learning. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's an evolution from where we were and where we are going. So I think from an operational standpoint, those are the areas which I would say. But obviously, if you look at AI overall or machine learning overall, I mean, Thomas did mention a couple of points around, claims, or I mean, even in the banking industry, when you look at trading, intelligent trading monitors, or if you look at also in the banking space, you know, the KYC sort of processes, and even in the fraud detection. I mean, there is a huge amount of application which is available, and to be honest, I mean, it is still improving. I mean, it's not that we are all there. We like to talk a lot about, you know, new tech, high tech, but at the same time, one of the challenges is the adoption of that technology in the industry, because of the challenge being with the data, right? So the kind of data which we handle is very unstructured. So that's where, and for AI or ML to work, you really need very structured kind of data. So I covered more than operations a little bit, so sorry about that, but yeah, this is my thought on this. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ms. Sourabh. You actually assisted me, because the next one, we are not only speaking on the operations, we also like to lead on to the fraud detection, compliance, where we speak more of the predictive, not so much of the BAU transactional things, but more of a little bit of a intangible behavioral analysis and so forth. So, Ms. Sourabh, would you like to continue on?
Okay. All right, so let's say, I mean, let's talk about fraud analytics, for example, right? So fraud analytics is something, I mean, I'm talking about insurance industry purely, but that could relate to the banking and in general, the financial services. In the insurance industry, from a statistical point of view, I mean, in fraud, insurance companies lose close to about $40 billion annually, which is, if you look at it, it's not a small sum of money to lose. And that extends when you go to the financial institutions, like banks. Also, they lose a lot of money in tune of like 150 billion in credit card frauds and loan frauds and things like that. So when you look at AI and how that comes into play, it's primarily based on better predictive modeling, because you then interact with a lot of databases, the government databases, and you can, looking at those databases, the model can evolve over a period of time. And what that does is actually helps you in identifying any patterns which are uncommon. So uncommon patterns could be detected. Then there could be things as simple as, the number of claims or from where the claims are coming. I mean, that's also an input, and the model continues evolving. So on the fraud analytics, there is a huge, I would say, a huge potential for AI, and it is being implemented. Now, also on other fronts, like, for example, apart from fraud, I mean, I would say things like, let's say claims handling or customer service we already covered. So claims handling is another area where this comes into play, and very effectively, because you're automating the processes, one thing, so the chances of human error is low. And you are basically, and there has been always this question around, AI is going to take away jobs. That's not the case. I mean, we are still working, and I'm sure we'll continue working. It's the machine-human interoperability which comes into play here, and that's where you talk about humans moving into roles which are more towards decision-making and which is more effective. And so you get rid of redundant work, mundane work, which probably people don't want to do, and then you move them into more important decision-making kind of role. So I'll pass it on to Robert, and Robert, you can share the thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think the two people to my left and to my right, I mean, they're sitting in their organizations turning this into reality, right? So I respect both of them and admire what they're embarking on. Two key things that I would say that the Splunk customer base has been asking us to deliver in terms of general outcomes. One has been, there's a general talent shortage, so help us with alert fatigue on the security side, right? So if you think about the poor SOC analysts, the volume of alerts that they're being hit with, our response to that has been to leverage analytics, right? So we've coined a term called risk-based analytics. We have a number of ML models that sit underneath that, and our very, very sophisticated institutions and some government agencies will then want to dig into the model. And what I've learned, because I'm not a data scientist, I'm not really, credentialed to go into the models themselves, but the fascinating piece, and someone said this earlier today, the model in and of itself is kind of just the starting point of the journey. But even before you get to the model, you need to have a data strategy, right? And a data strategy across whether it's a lake, whether it's an ocean, whether it's a series of rivers. So I think the disaggregation of data is something that is very challenging to solve, and we don't really need it to be solved based on our approach and strategy. When I look at the ML models that we have extended as part of the risk-based analytics, one objective is to reduce alert fatigue. The other is to focus on user behavioral threats. So insider threats, third-party threats, downstream supply chain threats. And often when those capabilities are activated inside of an organization, the baselining period normally takes about 6 weeks, but the organization is often quite waiting in anticipation. What did you find, right? If you've got 30 use cases, we kind of hope that we don't have 30 issues, like significant issues in our organization. But when we only find 4 or 5 or 2 or 3 out of 30, there's often this aha moment. Either your model is broken or there's something else that's gone wrong with this implementation of the project. Actually, organizations that generally have a good cyber hygiene and fraud practice have dealt with a lot of those easy outliers, and what we normally encounter will be corner cases. Where are the corner cases? We still have an ongoing challenge in any organization around shadow IT. Then you've got the DevSecOps world, and if I relate this back to Log4j, which happened back in December, when this CVE was announced, and I started doing my research, I thought, hang on, this is just a logging piece of software that applications use to log out to a third-party device. Presumably it's being monitored. This shouldn't be too difficult to actually solve. But what I found interesting when I attended a CISO lunch in Sydney, Australia, was that just about every banking and insurance CISO and CIO was complaining about the following. We found a lot of stuff because we ran vulnerability scanners. We went out and patched and asked vendors to fix their technologies. But for the code that's being compiled and recompiled, and this one software library is so deeply nested, there is still an unknown risk, right? So again, from a Splunk perspective, what we decided to do is, let's extend the capability of our ML model. And I think any decision around ML needs to be tied to what toolkits are being offered that then enable your data scientists and your teams within to then customize for your environment. The final point as it relates to fraud, and as I sort of referenced our use case library, what surprised me is the underlying capability, again, tied to data, is one key pillar of the strategy. As it relates to fraud, the irony is a lot of large organizations have actually merged security operations, network operations, and fraud operations into some kind of fusion center. You've probably heard the coin, and it's not really a practice that's available to every sized organization, so there's some limitations because you need a lot of people, you need an organization change. But as and when you're actually sharing data and insights across the various departments, I think there are synergies. And then the last piece is around the automation and response. So cyber working with fraud, they can come to some conclusions, and then whatever can be automated from a response point of view is that final piece, right? And I think these 3 things sort of tied together is where I think many organizations can benefit from in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. I also echo the fact that when you mention about the models as well as the predictive portion, the data scientist geek in me actually got excited because in my team, we were working on model management. And one of the key factors is not about building the models, but having the necessary talent to understand what model failure would impact, what are the items that, like you said, assumption, 30 items, maybe if you're lucky, we get 3, sometimes we don't get any. So yes, I echo what you said, that was really, I think, exciting for us. But also, we would like to go on further. Let's say, for a model, when it comes to that, we are speaking about the risk management portion of it, the compliance management portion of it, because not only that we are introducing automation in our structures, in our products, and also our operations, we are actually trying to understand what can be done, what cannot be done, how do we ensure the risk of the model going haywire or the model not behaving appropriately. So, Mr. Robert, again, what do you think about the future scope of risk management in this area?
Yeah, look, again, I guess from a vendor perspective, sometimes we have a tendency to oversimplify the application, and perhaps it's really only when it gets to on the customer side that we start to realize, okay, this technology or capability that was sold, how is this going to be implemented? How do we ensure that it's adopted on the client side, and how can we facilitate that part of the process? I think one of the things that we've been doing across APAC as trying to build a sense of community is we run regular workshops with our clients around these very topics, right? So how do you deal with an ongoing operation where you're looking to improve? How do you enable your team, your organization to leverage the tools that you've purchased? Another aspect to this, and I think David from Netscope sort of touched upon this earlier, you know, one of his objectives when he was a CISO was to actually consolidate without compromising posture, right? And I think the whole risk and compliance piece, and even when my own security practice engages with customers, you know, we're very focused on the security team, and sometimes we figure there's a risk team and there's a compliance team. And often, even within the organization, there is sort of a segregation of duty. So the teams don't actually openly communicate about what they've got. The risk team goes off to procure new tools. The compliance team does the same. And actually, the platform that they've invested in can actually be segregated and can provide them with each of the artifacts. One of the other issues that I've seen some recent news in Singapore on critical infrastructure, and I'll touch on this briefly. In Australia, the Parliament passed a bill around expanding the definition of critical infrastructure. So traditionally, we've thought of critical infrastructure as utilities, water, transport, those sort of sectors, but actually the definition has been broadened to include financial services. So insurance providers, the banking sector, and so with that expanded ecosystem, the banks were actually asking the government, what does this actually mean for us? Like, you're going to ask us to comply with these new standards, which increases the cost. What do we get in return? And I think, again, on the risk side, I think we need to cooperate as a community. And I think a lot of the forums that we're participating in, and I'm sure most of you are dealing with your regulator in MAS, it's ensuring that we've got that constant feedback loop as it applies to providing the regulator with that feedback. And if Singapore at some point gets the same idea from Australia, hopefully not, and they expand that definition of CII into the financial services sector, then that's something else to watch out for. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. What about you, Mr. Sourabh? What do you think?
So, from the risk management perspective, I think the application of AI, I mean, as you mentioned, right? So one of the things is around the risk models, because insurance in general, I mean, it's a business of managing risk. So when it is a business of managing risk, I mean, risk management becomes critical, and AI application, in fact, is, I mean, I was talking to some colleagues as early as yesterday about the implementation of self-service. You have the concept of the citizen data scientists, and you also have the concept of the auto ML, so auto machine learning. And how do you make that? How do you break down that black box of AI into more self-service technology, and how do you optimize? Because when you look at insurance, for example, risk management, pricing, these are the two areas which are super important. And that's where the underwriters and actuarials, the people, the brains behind the insurance company, they actually spend a significant amount of time. Now, when you look at that, do they really have to kind of spend so much of time crunching Excel sheets and databases and so on and so forth? So, I mean, the concept of automating that by using tools like, you have a lot of them like Azure AML, or you have Google machine learning. So there are multiple tools available, right? So how do you utilize so that the actuarial or the pricing analyst spends more time on decision making rather than basically crunching the models and doing the mundane work, right? So that's again, that's something which I think, and from a risk management perspective, I mean, AI, like, you use basically two technologies. One you use is the AI, the other one is the machine learning, and basically what you do is you look at removing the predictability element of the risk. And the good thing about AI ML technology, what it can do is it can help you better the iterations, the model improves over time. So maybe in the beginning the accuracy might not be that great, but then as you move forward, the accuracy improves. And that's what is something which, in my view, at least from an insurance industry point of view, AI/ML comes into play. And again, I mean, I would even extend that to the broader financial services organizations, where, I mean, even in banking, when you talk about risk management, it's a very important part of the portfolio, how you manage your risks. And there, again, it's in terms of, your intelligent automation, which can come into play. So, and also in terms of your advanced modeling, so cognitive analytics and things, that's where you can potentially, utilize that. So that's what I have to add on this topic. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sourabh. So I would also like to add from the risk management perspective is that for the insurance industry, it's keep on evolving where, like you said, maybe accuracy will be sacrificed at the very beginning. But as the time catches on, the improvement to it on the accuracy, at the end of the day, we were looking to see what can we do now to further reduce the residual risk inherent risk into a residual risk. So this is where the future scope that we are moving towards from. So let's not talk too much about the difficult predictive modeling. Let's go a little bit simpler to the robotic process automation. So this is something that is quite famous and a lot of companies has been adopting. Robotic process automation relies on simplifying tedious and repetitive work. So such as clicking in a few websites to retrieve some information, or even submitting certain information to a website. So Mr. Tomasz, what's your thought on this RPA automation, as well as how did it increase the productivity or the customer engagement point of view?
So I think when we speak about the RPA, we have to be cautious that it's a short-term solution, because I have been calling this for a while a corporate drug, because when you adopt this, it's very difficult to get out of it, because, and it's addictive, because you replace the process. with something semi-automated, because still requires, it's automated to the extent, and real benefit is just still requires technical resources, people technically trained to man them and supervise them, but it's at scale, it drives the efficiency. But it doesn't solve the problem. The fact that actually it's the processes and the ecosystem is not straight through. So that's why we always have to be conscious that this is not the end of the road, just the beginning and the intermediate state. Whatever people call it, the end state should always be end-to-end, completely automated process. So when you adapt, you always don't forget that you pave the way and set the roadmap to the end goal, which is end-to-end automation. And coming back to the examples are plentiful. The past 4 years, 5 years, has been a tremendous growth and explosion in adoption in all industries. Financial services were the first because, some of the advantage and key drivers is the fact that we still have a lot of green screen. And RPA is a way that helps to overcome it because the legacy doesn't come with the better interfaces and a way to integrate and automate. But this has been mostly efficiency play. In some cases, organizations were able to deliver the customer experience benefits mostly on reducing the time, or in terms of execution of the process, and reducing, and as well as reducing the error rates, because we have to remember that in most of the organization, what bogs down the process and creates problems are the errors, not necessarily execution of the process itself. This is what the error rates, they create a much more bigger impact on the customer experience, but as well as the efficiency of organization than the execution of the process itself.
Oh, thank you so much. What about you, Mr. Robert? What do you think?
I'll pass on this one.
Then I'm so sorry, Mr. Sourabh, will be you.
So intelligent automation, we're talking about intelligent automation and so yeah, I mean, RPA to a large extent, I mean, it has been successful and not so successful at the same time. I mean, there has been a lot of trial and error in this space, and we do talk about a lot of intelligent automation in particular in operations or claims or even, your back-end back office processes like finance or risk and everywhere. So in my view, I think it's a lot about identifying the right sort of use cases and what do you want to automate really, right? I mean, it's not about, hey, I mean, everyone is jumping down the cliff, I'm going to do the same. I mean, you need to understand what are some of the use cases and what are some of the processes which can get benefited from this, and and generally it doesn't make sense to start big bang. I mean, you need to go easy, I mean, with a proof of concept and see and prove, and when it works, I mean, then maybe you extend it to the other areas. Now, I would follow a very simple principle, and I would like to PACE it. PACE would stand for plan, assess, communicate, and evaluate. So, and that's where you would talk about, you need to plan really in advance what do you want to do. You need to assess what are the quantifiable benefits and outcomes which are going to come out of that. Then communicate, right? So, I mean, because stakeholder management, the teams which are going to be impacted, this is going to be super important, because if you don't do that, I mean, people really will not buy into your automation. People will see that as in, I mean, maybe the organization is trying to get rid of me because I'm doing not any value-added work. So, I mean, the question is, I mean, how do you communicate that message, right? And then evaluate basically after the proof of concept, share the results. So, and it's an iterative cycle, so which you need to, so that's why I said pace yourself when you are doing intelligent automation or RPA. So that's all I would like to add.
On the pace, the last one, engagement, no, sorry, what was the last one from pace? Evaluate, yes, my apologies. So in the evaluation, I think one of the things that we could add on is how to implement certain users matrix, as well as not only one, but multiple areas, where while maybe the main reasons for having this RPA may not solve the root, but it could possibly impact other portions. This is something that I've seen quite a lot in the insurance industry. But moving before the evaluation, which is to communicate, I agree especially on how people will react to RPA. And this also opens to the next question where we would like to invite all panelists to comment on, which is the current workforce ready to a very complete digital transformation. So I believe we can start from you, Mr. Sourabh, again, and then we move backward.
Sure. I mean, is the current workforce ready for complete digital transformation? I think the answer to that is yes and no. It depends, again, on the organization and the maturity. We do know there is a huge shortage of skills within the market, and especially when you talk about cutting-edge skills. And in traditional organizations or industries like insurance, which is, I mean, attracting the right kind of talent is a challenge. But again, if you have the talent, right, so how do you, I mean, are you able to transform across the value chain? I mean, the question is, I mean, maybe you need to reassess and see from a business strategy point of view that am I kind of biting so much that I can't chew? So maybe the idea is to, again, look at use cases. And I personally think, I mean, yes, we are already doing a lot of digital transformation, whether it is in the infrastructure space where you're talking about PaaS, SaaS platforms, cloud, etc., or in the application space where we talk about AI, ML, cognitive analytics, etc. So we are already implementing a lot of that. But then again, it has to be a roadmap, and it has to be defined as per the business strategy and the needs, and not like, yeah, I just want to do it, but without giving any thought to it. So.
Yeah, I guess looking at the market and customer base, as we wind out of COVID, there's just been a significant, tremendous rotation of resource and staff across many industries, which I'm sure many of you would have experienced yourselves. In talking to a few banking customers in the region, they've had a bit of a talent drain. I think now as things start to open up, people reflect on their own lives, their work-life balance. And for those of us who are stuck, you know, for 12, 14 hours a day, Zooming, Teams on various other platforms. So that's been a significant impact. One of the things that I discovered during my morning walk listening to a Harvard review was not oversizing that digital transformational undertaking for any organization and focusing on some areas of quick wins and then looking at how you roadmap that over time. Because one of the stats coming out of the study from Harvard was that whatever the objective was set by the board or the CEO, often organizations will, if at best, will only ever realize around 20% of the gain. Is the gain new revenue streams, cost optimization, the modernization of their, you know, of the IT assets and infrastructure and services. So I think, you know, just I feel everyone's pain around the staff rotation piece. We're also going through our own challenges, particularly on technical resources that are highly in demand. If you can spell cloud, if you can spell SaaS, if you can spell security, you know, talent retention to undertake those kinds of journeys is something that's pretty key to the execution of the strategy.
So I think that when we look broadly, and I'm not speaking about the Singapore market, but overall, I think we have to be honest that majority of the workforce is not ready. Why? Because it is, I think that in many occasions, we try to paint a picture which is, we believe it's not completely true. Because unfortunately, in many industries that rely on back office operations that are extremely manual, we don't create a sense of burning platform to provide the motivation for people that really, we want to help you, we want to bring you with us on board, but it takes two to the game. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we need to be, because those jobs will disappear, let's be honest. Singapore has a lot of great examples about reskilling, mid-career changes, bringing people over, but it really takes the internal motivation from the people that within our organization to take the journey. And I think, as well as many people didn't realize that we don't, and I'm independent from the age, but anyone who is still in the workforce, we can effectively work until 70. That's a big shift compared to the 5, 10 years ago. And people that are today in the 20s, most probably they will work until 80s. I know it's a gloom picture, but that's the reality. And it's not about, but in many cases there will be a choice. So if you pace it out, let's say starting at your 25 to, let's say, 30 plus 40 years of career, gives you opportunity for 3 different careers, very fruitful, rich careers. And if we start painting the picture and communicating in those terms, look, you have 10, 15 plus years in one career, then you need to reinvent yourself because on one hand, skills and experience devaluates over time. So this becomes the need to self-actualize in your industry, in your field, in your role is something that everyone will have to do. And we just need to be able to articulate this better. I think that this is an area where if we focus, it will create tremendous value and help us move the big parts of the population with us, because there's plenty of jobs, plenty of opportunities out there, and the shortage of the skills is the best example. Let's be honest, that in many cases, people will go for the training of 2-3 year training, and they can get very qualified jobs. And that's typically what's happening with the people graduating either from colleges or trade school. And I strongly believe there's not much of a difference, because as well the certain areas of the technology and knowledge is, I would say it's getting enterprise simplified. So you need to be a good operator to find an opportunity in the market. And there's no difference if you are 50 years old or you're 20 years old. I think that's just a stigma and the mental model we still operate, which is not, I think it's not valid, and we should debunk it, because it will help us as employers, us as an industry, but will help the people in the type of the professions and roles that are at risk.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. As a hiring manager myself, I believe that in the last 2 years especially, things have changed. Traditional hiring no longer work. Traditional retention no longer be what people would look for. They have their own ideology, what's next, and so forth. People, however, are much more acceptable to digitalization and changes more now than of those 2 years ago. Thank you very much for your time. And if I could just spare 30 seconds each on any keynote you would like to bring forth to the floor, would you want to just wrap up what do you believe on today? Mr. Thomas, we'll start from you.
So ecosystem is growing, and there's a lot of opportunity to be created for individuals, for companies, both established industry, as well as the startups, like playing in the broad fintech ecosystem. And clearly the past couple of years have proven that the best and the most efficient models are collaboration and cooperation models, because this is how you create the value for the long term.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robert.
Yeah, look, I guess for me, 26 years in the IT and tech industry, and now given, where we are in terms of the talent that's coming out of the education system, the range of options that young people have today, I think for all of us as leaders and people managers, having a career plan, career roadmap, and I never forget what my mentor once said to me in the early part of my career, the only person that's responsible for your development is you. But as a leader and a manager, providing the tools, the learning opportunities, ongoing education and development is something that we should give people time to do, right? There's always more than enough hours in the day for people to work and to work hard, and sometimes we ask them to go the extra mile, but giving challenging opportunities to bright people and letting them run, make mistakes as well, because we've all made our own fair share. The people side is very critical to the journey and future for all of us.
So from my point of view, I think the key takeaway is always be open to learning and opportunities, because there are always opportunities. Experimentation is a part of the career growth. Nowadays, if you don't experiment, you want to be stuck to something which you have been doing and you've been good at it. There are chances that in future that will not exist anymore. And so I personally think being open is critical, open to change, open to learning. And at the same time, I think it's also important to be able, as a manager, I believe, or as a leader, I think servant leadership is something which is very critical. I am here because of my people, and I will not be there if I'm not providing that opportunity which Robert was alluding to, if I don't provide them that opportunity to grow and develop. So servant leadership is super critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robert and Mr. Sourabh. For me, especially in terms of the leadership, one of the key items that we pick up, or at least I think is important to highlight again, is the portion of pacing, as well as the portion of identifying what is the quick win, as well as motivating the talent to continuously improve. Leadership plays a very big key, like I am here for my team, and I'll always be there for the team. So other than thinking of way to digitalize, you must know for the quick win where has the biggest impact, where has the biggest value, proper usage matrix, as well as combine with the team to run it through. Right. We have a lot of online certificates right now, and the most basic, we even have YouTube to get all the information we need. It's very different from the previous where we need to go through a long degree to get the skill set. So thank you very much, dear esteemed panelists. We would like to open to the floor for any questions that you may have on this item. No? You sure? 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, close. You may please join them for a conversation later, when we will pass it to the next event. Thank you.
Thank you very much.